That's probably the 10th time you've heard that joke, and I doubt I made it any funnier now. I think it's fairly obvious to most people who follow me that I am a big fan of Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl. I've shouted its praises endless times on Twitter. It's the game I've done the most gameplay videos of, when I used to do those on a consistent basis. And I've bought it 3 goddamn times. You're welcome, Game Mill. It's kind of funny how the world of Game Mill published Nick games are pretty much the only good thing that the company's ever put out. And even then, it took until a few games for it to really get a footing down, and not for nothing, if it weren't for the passionate fanbase Nicktoons already had pushing for improvement, the games wouldn't have been as good as they are. We started off with this. Some of you living under a rock might be confused by the title though. Rocket, NASB 2 hasn't been announced yet. Why are you talking about it? It doesn't exist. Thing is, you are right. It doesn't exist. Yet. There's been a few developments going on within the community that are pointing to us potentially getting a sequel in the future. Whether it's this year or next year is anyone's guess. But I've been having my own personal desires for a sequel to my favorite competitive game of all time for a while. Figured now would be a good time to do it. As much as I enjoy the game and think it's great fun, it does have its fair share of problems and shortcomings that I'd love to see get properly fixed in a full-on sequel. Enough to where I think such a thing is justified over just making a few more updates to the game we already have. The biggest issue that struck Nick Brawl since pretty much the start of development is Nick themselves. On top of giving the game a practically non-existent budget, there's been a bunch of different reports from the dev team that Nick severely limited what could be done with the game during its development. A good chunk of the problems boiled down to Nick wanting everything to stay in some realm of canon, meaning the devs really couldn't make up stuff for the games themselves, at least in terms of the roster. Color alts were pitched, but Nick rejected it, and arcade mode had to stay limited to lines straight from the episodes rather than unique dialogue. Typical corporate licensing bullshit, pretty much. When you're flat limiting the game's potential doing this, it kinda bogs down the full experience and makes it more soulless. Arcade mode is the most nothing shit I've ever played because of the reused out-of-context dialogue feeling lifeless and dull, even more so with the voice acting being added. Compare this to past Nicktoons games where the interactions between the characters were the main selling point and, not for nothing, the best parts of those games. In some cases, it was the only good part. They were also very low on time once the launch deadline was reaching. A bunch of stuff had to be saved for later. The game still didn't really have much in terms of single-player content after that, and everything aside from the core fighting mechanics felt rushed. Well, because it was. Many of the devs were not a fan of how tight the deadline was, with 0 chances of it being delayed, so it's definitely not their fault the game came out the way it did. Unfortunately, when you're dealing with a licensed game, this is just standard practice. A big factor as to why I feel a sequel would allow for more potential is because Nick seems to be loosening up with their weirdly strict guidelines for game devs. Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated, as much as I love it personally, suffered from a lot of similar problems NASB did, and as a result it felt like a bunch of missed potential. Whereas The Cosmic Shake, a game made 2 years later, has much more life to it and shows more care towards making a solid product without adhering to a strict set of rules, with a completely original story and bringing back the entire cast to record new lines. Not just that, more recent crossover games have done the same thing. Extreme Tennis has original dialogue, unique costumes, and voice acting before NASB got it. Kart Racers 3 has a bunch of original dialogue too, and even NASB itself started to get better with more and more updates. But it won't change the fact that the original game had to adhere to the guidelines during early development, and it's kind of stuck with what it has at its core. I do also hope that if it is being made, the devs have the time to get shit done and get it done right. I'm more than fine with waiting until next year if it means we're going to get a well-rounded, polished experience at the end of the day, but unless we're getting Kart Racers 4 or something completely out of left field, Game Mill seems to be pumping out a Nick game at the end of every year or so. I suppose it only makes sense for it to come out in 2023. Now that all that's out of the way, let's talk about what I actually want in the game. If there's one thing Nick Brawl is really good at as it stands, it's a framework. The core gameplay is honestly some of the most fun I've had with a platform fighter. It feels like Melee except way more frantic and batshit, which I think makes it way more fun. It also has much less super intricate mechanics. Look, I know everyone's just gonna tell me to get good, but the fucking wave dash in NASB is 2 buttons compared to whatever the fuck this is. Anyway, I really wouldn't change too much about the core gameplay. Honestly, I kinda hope they just use the exact same engine or whatever and just build on top of it. I do have some ideas for new stuff though. Keep in mind, I am not an expert on fighting games and how to properly balance them. I'm just shooting out ideas that I think would be fun to fuck with. First off, maybe some method of using slime. I find it kind of odd that slime really has no proper place in the game, considering how heavily the Kart Racers games use it. Though the question here is, how can you incorporate it without it being too cumbersome or distracting? Well, firstly, allow players to turn it off. But even beyond that, I think slime should be a risk and reward system. Rather than simply collecting slime, you get it from playing well. Perhaps there could be a proper combo system added in that has slime get knocked out of your opponent that you collect, and KOing an opponent in certain ways will yield different amounts of slime as well. What would slime do though? Well, I figured I'd take a page out of not a platform fighter, Pokken Tournament, and have it go multiple ways. First thing would be an assist system. This kind of idea is already part of the kart racers, but I'd want to see it taken a step further. My idea is essentially on-command assist trophies. I think the best action would have to be to have each character have their own specific assist character that fits into their moveset properly. Some could be offensive, defensive, they could heal, whatever could work. It'd give more characters who wouldn't really work as fighters an opportunity to be a part of the game in a meaningful way. Second thing would be, of course, supers. Something that really only Smash has in terms of platform fighters as far as I'm aware. And cue everyone correcting me in the comments. I think Nick Brawl of all games would benefit from supers, since Nicktoons have a lot of crazy shit you can pull from their attacks. I think for the slime mechanic to be more balanced, the supers would have to be toned down or take more built up slime to use. Personally, I prefer the former anyway, since, I don't know man, I want to see a platform fighter where supers are actually used in competitive play. Even though I know that still probably won't happen, but I digress. Some obvious stuff like SpongeBob rocking his Goofy Goober wizard outfit, Jenny unleashing a giant barrage of weapons at once, or even some crazier stuff like Patrick pulling out his house and repeatedly slamming someone with it, or Zim pulling out a Florpus to suck everything and shoot it back out somewhere else. Hell, just give Ren and Stimpy a happy happy joy joy screen nuke, that'd be great. I also prefer both of these to have their own dedicated buttons, however possible that would be. Something out there, maybe like pressing both buttons for the assists and both triggers for the super. This way you wouldn't need to worry too much about accidentally activating it when you're fighting someone. A lot of people say that Nick Brawl is kind of an ugly game. A bit cheap looking, yeah, honestly. Ugly? I don't agree at all. Honestly, I feel the cheap look of the game is what adds to the charm. It gives off a vibe similar to that of the other crossover games that just, you know, not looking like they come out of the pits of hell or something. But even I have my fair share of minor gripes I'd like to see fixed. There's one more bizarre request I'd have. I'd want to see the game go for more of a, maybe not cel-shaded, I don't really know how to describe it. What I mean is something like Smash 3DS, which gave the characters customizable outlines and such. I feel a good way to make it look more unique is to really drive home the fact that it's a collection of cartoon characters put together, so giving it a more cartoony look would help the game stand out. This could also apply to the visual effects. I think having more 2D cartoony effects could help over the more generic effects the game already has. Not much else though, I'm personally totally fine with how the game looks as is, so this is more of me just spitballing stuff. Now the real area of the game I personally think is lacking is the UI and menus. Not to say it's exactly bad, but it leaves a lot to be desired. For starters, the game's HUD. It's fine, honestly I kinda like how it looks, but if I were to design it, I figured I'd give it more of a slimy aesthetic, with the show's logo being plopped into the slime bit depending on the character. For the slime mechanic, I figured the bottom part could grow more green as it goes on, halfway for the assist and fully when the super is ready. A bit more personality to it than the generic look of the original, admittedly. For the menus, ever since we first got a glimpse of them, I was very let down. It looks very cheap, which is a shame, because I'd argue the Kart Racers games got their menus down very well, bursting with life and very vibrant. Nick Brawl's is very bland in comparison. It's very much trying to replicate the Smash 4 menu look, and not very well. I think something more standard would work better, and would leave room for creative experimentation. And just make the damn background purple like in the trailers and stuff. It looks so much nicer than this gross sky blue in the menus already. I think it'd also be neat if there were more 3D models and animations in the menus itself. Again, just like the kart racers. Maybe something like Smash 64 where there's little animations of the characters on the character select before they go static or idle. Audio-wise, I quite like the sound design in Nazby, so I don't have much I'd change. The voice acting, however, I'd want to see touched up. It was added post-launch after tons of requests, so maybe now it could be fine-tuned a little. The big thing I want is actual character interactions, maybe not as intricate as something that Multiverses has, but smaller things, like specific quips for being certain characters, and unique dialogue for arcade mode. Maybe even tie it in with a small story like in PlayStation All-Stars. Also, just to touch on it briefly, while I don't think it's absolutely necessary as I'm personally a big fan of Nazby's OST, some songs directly from the shows would be neat, even if they're covers. I personally don't care that much, but I remember it being a highly requested thing for the original, so figured it'd be best to mention it. I'd personally prefer proper victory themes instead, but that's just me. Please add those though, that'd be rad. Alright, first things first, please Please have crossplay at launch. Crossplay was intended for the first game back last year, and it still hasn't happened. I get that it probably got lost in the dev cycle and all, but the lack of it definitely hurt the game a lot. With so many people having their own platform preferences, it's a bit difficult to get the game set up proper for everyone. So this would just make things easier and more convenient. I'm sick of having to play it on my Switch because all my friends have it on there. And another obvious thing, just more alts please. Or a color picker, or something. I do like how the game has more of actual costumes for most characters, and I'd love to see that come back and for us to get more. But one alt per character is insane. Just let the devs do their thing, Nick. A purple SpongeBob won't kill you. Like, there's so much you can pull for the SpongeBob characters alone. I'm surprised the ones we got were... yeah. Okay, now that we got the obvious stuff out of the way. More single-player content. Some people want some kind of subspace type story mode, which... I'm sorry, that is never happening. Way too much for the devs with the size that they are. However, like I mentioned before, I think a refresh of arcade mode with more of a story to it would be fun. Just flat copy PlayStation All-Stars. Give each character special opening and closing cutscenes that describe what their own unique adventure is and give them unique dialogue to correspond with it. As much as people want a grand story, I think most people would understand if we can't get something like the Unite games, and that's alright. Just give us something to stick our teeth into. How about some collectibles that you can unlock, like Smash before they made them suck? Another reason why arcade mode is such a nothing mode is because all you get is stuff in the gallery that really doesn't do much, just some alternate renders and screen caps. Something I think would be really cool is if we had something akin to the spirits or trophies from Smash. Reuse the artwork for the pit crew members, honestly, and put little blurbs next to them to give more info on the characters. Make it a real big Nick celebration that you can collect and give incentive for the single player modes for more casual players to keep coming back. Alright, that was a lot. What about cutting content? I'd personally not want much to get cut from the game, but I understand that some things need to get taken out to make way for the new. I don't want a single character to get cut, but if we end up with cuts, I think Nigel and Shredder are the most likely to get the boot. I don't want it, but with how things turned out with Car Racers 3, those are the closest I have to an idea. Please don't though, seriously. Alright, that's all the general content of the game. Now time for the big part. Of course, I'm going to talk about new characters. I have my own big wishes that I have big ideas for, but I'll start off with some characters I'm not as passionate about, but I think have a good chance. So if I'd have to classify anyone as a lock, I would say Squidward and Zuko, of course. Squidward has already seemingly leaked, and let's be real, he's the most obvious choice for a fourth SpongeBob rep. Most of the other picks aren't as likely, I'm afraid. I also feel he has the most potential for a really goofy moveset. The SpongeBob characters already have very specific jokes from the show heavy movesets, and I feel Squidward would just take that to 11 since he's really not much of a fighter in general. One of the leaks is just him on the chair from jellyfishing. I don't think there's much doubt about him just being really fucking dumb, and I wouldn't have it any other way. And Zuko is just an obvious choice for a fourth Avatar rep. Simple as that. I am not an Avatar fan. I don't have anything else to go off of. He's a firebender. That sounds like a fun opportunity for a brawler. Who else? I'm not 100% about the other Ninja Turtles making it in. The TMNT fan inside me wants them in, but the realist in me knows that it's not too likely. If we were to get Donnie and Raph in the game, I'd personally love for them to use their Rise designs. It'd open up the door for a more unique moveset with the different types of weapons and abilities they have, especially Donnie. You could tie it into the story too, maybe make a Turtles Forever reference or something where they're fighting someone from an alternate timeline. Funnily enough, Donnie and Raph were the only turtles to show up in the Nicktoons fighting game before Nazby, and they use their Rise designs in there too. I'm just saying, perfect circle opportunity here. There's also a bunch of characters from shows already represented in the game that I don't have too much to say other than, yeah, they'd be cool and make sense. Jimmy's an obvious choice, probably another lock. He probably would have been DLC had Hugh not made a massive meme reputation for himself to boost himself forward. I'd also love to see Sheen. Maybe make a few Planet Sheen references just to fuck with everyone. Though, no matter what, if he gets in, Shoo-Wop better be part of his moveset, and it better be the most annoying fucking move in the game. I wouldn't be surprised if we got Ronnie Ann as the third Loud House rep rather than another Loud. I don't see much potential in the others for fighting, honestly. At least Ronnie could use her skateboard and blades for maneuverability and stuff. I think she'd actually be super fun if you look past the Loud House getting another rep, which I know a lot of people will not be happy about regardless. There's a lot of choices for a second Danny Phantom rep. I personally do not want Vlad at all. I can't see him being nothing more than a floaty shredder, I'm sorry. I personally think someone like Sam or Ember will be better choices, especially Ember. We haven't seen too many musical-based characters in platform fighters. I think she provides something really unique to the game. I also have some more picks like Professor Membrane, not Dib, sorry, Vexus, Filbert, but I can't really say too much extra about them. I just think they'd be neat, alright? Before we get to the new shows though, I do have one big personal wish. There are a ton of meme picks I could get into the game, and we know the devs aren't beyond including characters for the sake of a meme in honor of the community. There's some choices already like Fanboy and Chum Chum. Personally I'd go with Kyle, but that's just me. But I have a better idea. Yeah, this fucking guy. Ever since he got a Pit Crew edition in Kart Racers 3, basically confirming that Garfield and Friends is fair game for the crossovers now, I want Pinky the goddamn clown to get added. Not only is he just a goofy asshole that I love to see in the show, but a clown is, once again, something we really don't see in these games. This dude has a lot of shit to work with. Spray you with a flower, slap you with boxer shorts, fall off a unicycle for a dash attack, and make the birthday song a super. That's all I want. Okay, next up. One thing I feel is severely lacking from the modern Nick crossovers is more modern representation. The best that we have is Squidina and the Campers in Kart Racers 3, but, you know, those are SpongeBob spin-offs. I don't really count those too much. What about a new original pick? I feel Parker is one of the most slept-on modern choices for the game. I know everyone wants Miko from Glitch Text, and I have another choice I will save for later, which, you know, valid, but not only is Middlemost Post underrated as all hell, please go watch it, but Parker himself has a distinction of being a shapeshifter, and not like SpongeBob where it's mainly for the purpose of a gag or something. It's a part of his character. He could have an insane moveset with infinite possibilities, although he'd probably be the floatiest in the game, being a literal cloud, but I don't mind. I don't mind a bit of float bullshit in my platform fighters, honestly. Another aspect I feel is missing is a Nick Jr. rep. Now, I get it. Having a preschool character getting their shit rocked on screen is probably a big no-no for the bigwigs at Nick, but I hope they'd be willing to loosen up for just one character. Blue is definitely the character out of all the Nick Jr. picks, I think, that not only has the most potential for the game, but is the most deserving. From what I can gather, in terms of pure brand recognition, Blue's Clues is pretty much Nick's second biggest brand name after SpongeBob, and is the longest running animated franchise to come out of Nick Jr. Dora might have been more iconic during the time the original series was going on. It definitely was, I'm not going to deny that at all. And I wouldn't be fully against Dora either, but once again, I think Blue has more potential. I feel if anything, she'd be more similar to someone like Phoenix Wright in Marvel vs. Capcom 3, using clues to get more powerful with her attacks and stuff. I also think it would be a good way to ease new players into the combo system by having her clue mechanic be very combo reliant, but said combos are very easy to pull off in comparison to the rest of the cast, except just not as strong. I have some more, of course, but I don't want to drag the video out too much longer. Obviously, Timmy Turner. I really hope they can figure out some way to get the rights to work out this time around, because he really does belong in the game and his moveset potential is nuts. El Tigre is a big fan favorite, and I will honestly be very pissed if he doesn't make it, simply for the fact his creator is practically begging on his damn knees for his inclusion. I'd personally love to see more of the lesser known Nicktoons like Chalk Zone and the Mighty Bee get more attention, so give me Rudy or Snap and Bessie. Now, if you know me, you already know what my most wanted is, and I know it's fucking fruitless at this point, but I don't give a shit.
Rainbow, butterfly, unicorn, kitty.
Man, I am just really hoping someone at Ludosity or Fairplay Labs has been hearing my plea since reveal day for this character. I want her in so bad, you have no idea. Felicity is definitely a big oddball. Some would debate Arbok itself really isn't a Nicktoon. Jury's out on that, but Paramount Plus labels it as such, so I'll fucking take what I can get. Felicity is sort of similar to Parker, where she's a shapeshifter, but much more limited. Each of her forms have varied uses rather than a one-time situational purpose. I feel the best course of action for her would be to have her different forms work for specific groups of attacks. She'd be normal for her grounded light attacks, she'd have rainbow power for her grabs, butterfly power for her aerials, and unicorn power for her strongs and dash attacks. And to round it out, making Kitty power her super, even if it'd just be a screen nuke. It definitely will never happen, but I am hoping, by some insane chance, someone on the dev team saw me screaming her name and convinced Nick to make it work. And that's it. Again, we really don't know much about the game, or if it even exists. Honestly, I do think the cards are in favor of the game coming, though. It's just a matter of when. I will be more than happy if we had to wait for the latter half of next year. Just let these guys cook and give them the freedom to make a damn good game. That's all I ask. So if anyone at Ludosity, Fairplay, or GameMail happen to find this, go ahead and steal my ideas. Pretend you saw nothing.